About 5 years ago, I had a layout that was about 95% complete, but it had a lot of defects that I didn't think I could correct without starting over. So I was getting to the point where I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do that in my life, now's the time. And so I tore out probably 80 or 90% of it, just about doubled my space, and started rebuilding. So since we're focusing on Calaveras County this year, I thought I'd give you an update on the Angels branch, which is a part of my new layout. And I will also sit down just so everybody can see. So this is the room about 5 years ago. If I get my laser pointer going here. The old layout ended right at that line there where the carpet ends. And the part I retained is just this upper level here, and there's about a 6-foot alcove beyond this backdrop. That was all saved, everything else came out. The area from here up to here was an existing kind of spare room that really wasn't used for much of anything. And from here on back to the camera was exterior. All of this is under a deck, by the way, that's pretty much weatherproofed. But we added 20 or 15 feet of additional space. So I ended up with a room that was right at 50 feet long and kind of zigged and zagged, but ranged from 10 to 13 feet wide. As you can tell, there's a lot of work yet to be done, but I have been making some progress. That's the same backdrop we saw before, although this peninsula is about 12 feet from that backdrop. So there's actually another peninsula extending out this way, and we'll see that in just a second. As far as goals for my new layout, and this is kind of the flip side of all the defects I saw with my old layout, I wanted to minimize hidden track. I didn't want any duck unders or lift outs. I tried that, and I did not succeed very well. I had some very narrow aisles, so I set my minimum at 30 and pretty well stuck to it. I wanted to expand the area to squeeze in as much as I possibly could. I was becoming more interested in operations, so I wanted to improve the ability to walk around with the train and stay with it without having it cut across a peninsula or whatever. And I figured this is the time to convert to DCC with sound. As far as the track plan itself, I was already modeling the Sierra as it was in the 1920s. I wanted to include the entire main line. I wanted some staging to represent the major lines to which it connected in Oakdale. I wanted a significant representation of the Angels branch and at least one of the 2 dam building branches that were active in the 20s. And again, operations friendly. And the switchbacks in River Bridge. I wanted a long run as long as I could squeeze in, but I still wanted it to be uncluttered. I didn't want it sharing track with other parts of the railroad. And as with the whole layout, I wanted it to be operations friendly. As built, I got those scenes in, plus some more, as you'll see. It is isolated. I ended up with a layout that in some areas is 2 decks, but in many areas it's 3 decks. And in those areas, the 3-deck areas, the Angels branch is the sole occupant of the middle level, and then it becomes the upper of 2 decks. When it goes towards the River Canyon and then Angels Camp. I did have to put in a 1.25 turn helix to get down to that middle deck from Jamestown, but otherwise there is no hidden track on the Angels branch. I got a 160-foot run and did get in River Bridge plus 6 other trestles. I've forgotten the exact number, but the real Angels branch had something like 20 or 21 trestles, and so I wanted to get in as many as I could just to replicate that feature of it. And for operations, I wanted to have some switching opportunities along the line as well as in Angels Camp. So there is 1 passing siding, double-ended passing siding, plus 7 spurs. Find my laser pointer here. So at this point, we're in 2-deck territory, and Jamestown is on the upper deck. The Angels branch, and this is pretty much prototypically laid out, the Angels branch goes downhill, dives into this helix, goes around once, and then pops out here. And then at this point, it just follows a narrow shelf, and you'll notice on these track plans, this is basically a shelf railroad, although there are 3 peninsulas, but they're double-sided except for the top level. It's just running through open country, comes to Table Mountain Cut, and to Marble Spur. So now let's take, initially here I'm going to give you some sort of overall shots that put it in the context of the entire layout. So here's Jamestown on the upper level, and then down below this is actually Resasco, where the Don Pedro branch takes off. And this is the Angels branch leaving the main line and coming down, and it goes into the helix right about there. Popping out the other side of the helix, which is in here, the Angels branch comes out on the middle level and follows, this shelf is only about 8 inches wide at this point, but I did run the track sort of winding through just because of trying to get the image of it climbing up towards Table Mountain Cut. At the end of that shelf, now we come through Table Mountain Cut, around the corner, and end up in Marble Spur, which is the first switching opportunity. I could not squeeze in the industries at the edge of Jamestown. Now the other half of the track plan, Marble Spur was right here, so we continue on around the corner and we arrive in Tuttletown, which is kind of spread out. This is the trestle over what is now Highway 49. This is the one and only passing siding along the line. This is the section house, a couple houses. This is a little warehouse that served several of the gold mines in the area. And then leaving Tuttletown, go across another trestle, running in the countryside. And these trestles are not models of any specific trestle. This is just a great location for a trestle, very visible. Made a little scratch-built model of the Mark Twain cabin that sits up on Jackass Hill, just for I have a lot of visitors who are not model railroaders, so I like to put in sort of general interest scenes as well. Then we round this corner into the river canyon, and this, from here on, is the part that I saved from my old layout. So we go through the switchbacks, down here, cross River Bridge, past the Maloney's Mill, the other two switchbacks, and then on up to Carson Hill and into Angel's Camp per se. So this is, we've just come around the corner from Marble Spur. This is Tuttletown, that's the section house. Here's the trestle. I have some more buildings to build, but there is a highway passing underneath. This is the other end of Tuttletown with the mine in the corner, the trestle. There will be more trees installed in a lot of these scenes. Coming around that peninsula, here's another trestle on the Angels branch. Mark Twain cabin's buried up in these trees here. Then we round that corner into the river canyon, switchbacks, cross River Bridge. This was scratch built based on the plans that John Scott drew up after the drought back in the 70s, I think it was. Switchbacks up the other side, and there's no prototype scene that I'm aware of that has three trestles side by side, but given that I have the switchback tracks close to each other, I thought that would be a great place to work in some trestles, but also to illustrate the steepness of the grades. My grades are the same as the prototype, which I think is about 4.3%. And if you look at those head on, you really notice how steep those grades are. And then finally at the top of the grade, we go on into Angel's Camp, which is on this upper level, and it terminates right there. Well, I want to finish up by just giving you we'll go on a model tour of the branch with closer in photos. Of course, our locomotive pulls out of the roundhouse in Jamestown. I scratch built this many years ago and of course saved it from the old layout and installed it on the new one. We're going to be on a train pulled by our old friend number 30 and Gus Swanson at the controls. We get on at the Jamestown Depot. This was scratch built right before Jerry's model kit came out, so you can thank me for that kit coming out.
Yours is better.
Here we are at Table Mountain Cut, Marble Spur, Tuttletown. Again, I need to add a few buildings there. Here's a couple scenes that I don't have prototype equivalents for. This is the Mark Twain cabin that I went up and photographed it of the replication that's up there currently. The switchbacks are not oriented the way that the real switchbacks are necessarily, especially since I made those part of the original layout, which was much smaller. I just squeezed them in however I could. I just wanted to have the 4 switchbacks, 2 on each side of the river. One thing I mentioned, I have a lot of general public visitors, so one thing I do to get people to move around rather than stand and see it from a distance is have lots of different species of animals, and I sort of have a contest to see how many types of animals you can find. And that really gets people moving around and looking at the details. So here's a few examples of that. Here we are arriving at Angels Camp. Scratch built the turntable out of styrene again. It's manually powered just like the real one was. The pivot is a phonograph jack, so that provides the power as well to the track. I do have a couple of the industries in the Angels Yard to provide some switching opportunities. It's break time on my model, so we've got some HO scale people not working as hard as they normally do. But speaking of work, I've gotten more and more into operations, and that includes the Angels branch. A couple of years ago, a couple of us in Mariposa County, Paul Claffey, who's here, and myself, started having operating sessions at each of our 2 layouts monthly. As a general premise, we use timetable and train order, although on a rather informal basis. We're not overly serious about it. I use Easy DCC with sound, the same system that John Zock has. I've based my operations on the prototype timetable from the early 20s. One of the standard jobs on the operations is the Angels Branch job, and just like the real one, you leave Angels Branch or Angels Camp early in the morning. You have some switching along the line. Again, based on the prototype, there's a maximum of 3 cars plus the engine and caboose with the switchback, so sometimes you may have to double the hill. Then, upon arrival in Jamestown, you spend several hours there switching. You meet both passenger trains, so you can transfer baggage directly from one baggage car to another. And then once they're out of town, you actually help both of the scheduled freight trains that come through town one after another with switching that they have to do in Jamestown. And then late afternoon, you head back to Angels Camp. So it's a real nice combination of being all by yourself out in the middle of nowhere and not worrying about schedules. You do have a schedule, but it's rather relaxed. So that's the end of the line. Thanks for watching, and please do come for a visit if you have a chance. Thanks a lot.